They told me to sit in the third row at my own daughter's wedding, treating me like a cracked tile they couldn't wait to replace. My ex-wife and her new husband thought I was just a mistake from the past, a silent checkbook with a pulse. But they forgot that I'm the one who designed the floor they were standing on. And an architect doesn't just know how to build a life, he knows exactly how to demolish one when the foundation is rotten. If you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. It helps to know someone is witnessing the collapse. I didn't just bring a wedding gift to the altar. I brought the wrecking ball. It started when the envelope arrived on a stormy Tuesday, carried in on the back of a gale that was already battering Chicago. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday, carried in on the back of a storm that had been battering Chicago for the better part of a week. From the 40th floor of the Meridian Tower, the city looked like it was drowning. The rain didn't just fall, it was a physical assault, hammering against the reinforced glass sheets with a rhythm that sounded like 1,000 tiny knuckles rapping for entry. I stood with my forehead resting against the cold pane, looking down at the gray wash of the streets below. I designed this building. I knew the drag coefficient of the wind against the curtain wall. I knew exactly how many tons of steel rebar were woven into the concrete core like veins in a human body. I knew that the sway, barely perceptible to the layperson, was calculated to the millimeter to prevent catastrophic shear. My name is Thomas Wright. I am an architect. My life is defined by the understanding of how things stand up. I understand that a structure is only as honest as the soil it sits on. I know that compression and tension must be in perfect equilibrium. And I know, with the intimacy of a surgeon, that hidden rot, the kind you can't see behind the drywall, will eventually bring down even the strongest steel. A hairline fracture in a foundation, if left ignored, isn't an annoyance. It is a promise of collapse. But as I watched the fog swallow the spire of the Willis Tower in the distance, I didn't realize that the foundation of my own life was already groaning under a weight it could no longer sustain. I didn't hear the snapping of the bolts. "Mr. Wright?" The voice was tentative. It broke the seal of silence in my office. I turned slowly. Sarah, my executive assistant, stood in the doorway. She was a woman of efficiency and bright smiles, the kind of person who kept my chaotic schedule in a rigid, comforting grid. But today, she wasn't smiling. She looked pale, her eyes darting from my face to the carpet. She held a cream-colored envelope in her hand. She held it by the very corner, as if it were a loaded gun, or something radioactive. "It arrived," she said. Her voice was barely a whisper, swallowed by the sound of the rain. "The invitation?" "Yes." She stepped forward, her hand trembling slightly, and placed it on the mahogany expanse of my desk. It sat there, isolated, stark against the dark wood. "Thank you, Sarah. That will be all." She hesitated. She wanted to say something. A platitude, perhaps, or an apology on behalf of a universe that had decided to be cruel. She knew it for a firm this size. Silence travels faster than sound. Everyone knew. She nodded once, tight-lipped, and closed the door. I stared at the envelope. It was heavy, unnecessarily so. Expensive cardstock, textured like linen, the kind that costs $3 a sheet. You could feel the money in the paperweight. It was a flex, a tactile display of else meant to be felt before a single word was read. I picked it up. A faint scent drifted up to me, cutting through the sterile smell of conditioned air and old coffee. Lavender. My stomach turned over, a slow, sickening rotation. Lavender was Linda's signature scent. My ex-wife. 10 years ago, that smell meant home. It meant the warmth of a pillow next to mine. It meant safety. It meant the life I thought I was building for the long haul. Now, it smelled like polished courtrooms. It smelled like the leather of lawyers' brief chairs. It smelled like alimony checks and the icy silence of a custody exchange. I turned the envelope over. The return address was embossed in gold foil. The Vance residence, 43002 Highland Park Drive. My breath hitched. My hand tightened, crumpling the edge of the expensive linen. That was my house. I had drawn the blueprints for 430 Highland Park on a drafting table in a one-bedroom apartment when I was 26 years old. I had poured the foundation. I had selected the grain of the oak for the staircase. I had designed the bay windows specifically to catch the morning light in the kitchen because I knew Linda liked to drink her tea while watching the birds. That house wasn't just wood and brick. It was a physical manifestation of my love for my family. And now, another man's name was stamped in gold above the address. Robert Vance. The man who drove the car I paid for. The man who slept in my master bedroom, under the ceiling I had framed. I reached for my letter opener. A sleek sliver of Japanese steel. I slit the envelope open with a surgical motion. The paper tore with a sharp, violent rip that echoed in the quiet room. Inside was a card, heavy as a slate tile with looping gold lettering. Mr. and Mrs. Robert and Linda Vance invite you to the wedding of their daughter Jessica Marie. I read it twice. The words swam for a second, refusing to coalesce into meaning. Their daughter. Not our daughter. Theirs. Jessica has my eyes. She has my chin. She has the stubborn set of my jaw when she's concentrating. I held her the moment she was born, before she had even taken her second breath. I walked the floors with her. When she had colic, I taught her how to calculate the hypotenuse of a triangle. But on this card, in this gold foil fantasy, I had been erased. I was a structural redundancy that had been engineered out of the blueprint. I slipped the card out of the envelope. There was a handwritten note on the back. I recognized the script immediately. It was Jessica's handwriting, looping, bubbly. I had seen this handwriting evolve from crayon scribbles to high school essays. Dad, I know this is awkward, but Robert and Mom think it's best if you sit in the third row. I stopped reading. The air in the room seemed to thin, making it hard to breathe. The third row, the first row is for parents. The second is for grandparents and siblings. The third row, that is for distant cousins. For neighbors you barely know. For business associates you are obligated to invite but hope won't show up. It was a demotion, a spatial assignment of my worth in her life. I forced myself to read the rest. My eyes burning. We want the photos to look cohesive. Robert has been so supportive during the planning. He's going to walk me down the aisle. A sharp pain, physical and acute, spiked in my chest. My hand tightened on the card until the edge cut into the skin of my thumb. Walk her down the aisle. That was my job. That was the implicit contract, signed the day she was born. That was the moment every father waits for. The long walk, the transfer of care, the final act of letting go. Please, just come and be happy for me. Don't make it about you. You're a part of the past, Dad. A mistake we've all moved on from. A mistake. I looked at the word. It sat there, innocent in blue ink, but it carried the weight of a wrecking ball. I wasn't just a rejection. It was a revisionist history. I was an error in the calculation, a flaw in the design that had finally been corrected. I walked to the window again. I pressed my palm against the glass. It was freezing. The cold seeped into my skin, numbing the nerves, matching the sudden drop in temperature in my blood. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. Anger is hot. It's a fire that consumes. This was something else. This was the cold clarity of a structural engineer realizing the load is too heavy for the support beams. It was the feeling you get when you inspect a 50-story building and see a hairline crack in the foundation. A crack that, to the untrained eye, looks like nothing. But to me, it means the whole thing is going to come down. Sarah, I said. My voice was calm, too calm. It sounded mechanical, like a recording. The intercom buzzed. Yes, Mr. Wright. Cancel my meetings, all of them. For the afternoon, for the week, there was a pause on the line. Mr. Wright, the meeting with the City Planning Commission is tomorrow. The stadium project. Cancel it, I said, my voice leaving no room for argument. I have a structural failure I need to address. I turned around, facing the empty office. And Sarah, get me the file on the Education Trust. The one I set up for Jessica in 2010. The trust for Jessica? Her voice pitched up in confusion. Yes, I need to see the structure. If they were going to treat me like a mistake, I needed to check my math. If I was being erased, I wanted to see exactly what it cost to remove me. I sat in my leather chair. It was Italian, ergonomic, and cost more than my first car. I was a wealthy man. I had built half the skyline of this city. My name was on plaques in lobbies of buildings that scraped the clouds. But as I read that note again, you're a part of the past, I realized I was bankrupt in the only currency that mattered. I picked up the phone. My hand hovered over the keypad. I shouldn't call. I knew that. The invitation was a statement, a closed door. Calling was an act of desperation. But I needed to hear her say it. I needed to hear the frequency of her voice to know if this was truly her, or if she was echoing the acoustics of that house. I dialed Jessica's number. The phone rang. Once, twice. The sound was a lonely drone in the quiet office. "Hello?" Her voice was tight, anxious. Not the voice of a happy bride-to-be. It was the voice of someone waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Jessica," I said. "It's Dad." Silence on the other end. Thick, heavy silence. I could hear her breathing. "Did you get the invite?" she asked finally. Her voice was small, shrinking away from the receiver. "I did. I'm reading the note, Jess. The third row. Dad, please, don't start." The defense mechanisms snapped into place instantly. "Mom said you'd make a scene." "I'm not making a scene. I'm sitting in my office talking to my daughter. But walking you down the aisle? Jessica, that's not about photos. That's not about aesthetics. That's about who raised you. That's about who held the bike seat." "Robert did raise me," she snapped. The anger was sudden, rehearsed. It didn't have the natural cadence of a genuine emotion. It sounded like a line she had memorized, like someone had coached her on exactly where to place the emphasis. "He was there for the day-to-day, Dad. You were always at the firm. You were always building something else. You were always looking at blueprints instead of me."
Robert was present.
The accusation hit its mark. It was the one weak point in my armor, the guilt of the provider. "I was building a future for you," I said gently, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. "I worked those hours to make sure you never had to worry. I paid for that house. I paid for your prep school. I paid for your college. Robert paid for college," she shouted. I froze. The world seemed to stop spinning. The rain against the glass went silent. "What?" I asked. The word came out as a whisper. "Robert paid my tuition," she said, her voice shaking with a mix of defiance and tears. "He told me. He sat me down and showed me the ledger. He said he handled it because you refused to contribute. He said you didn't care enough to write the checks." My hand gripped the phone so hard, my knuckles turned white. I felt the plastic housing creak. "He told you I refused?" "Stop lying, Dad. It's pathetic. It's over. Just come to the wedding or don't." "I don't care, but don't try to rewrite history." "Jessica, listen to me." "Goodbye, Dad." The line went dead. I sat there, the drone of the dial tone buzzing in my ear like a persistent insect. Lies. They weren't just erasing me. They were replacing me. They were building a life, a narrative, a family history on a foundation of absolute, concrete lies. Robert Vance, the man with the handshake that felt like a wet fish. The man who had investments but no office. He had told my daughter that I, the man who had started a savings account for her the week we found out Linda was pregnant, had refused to pay for her education. A cold fury began to rise in me. It wasn't the hot flash of a temper tantrum. It was the cold, calculated determination of a demolition expert surveying a condemned building. The door opened. Sarah walked in. She held a thick blue folder in her arms. She looked at my face, and whatever she saw there made her stop. "Here it is, Mr. Wright," she said softly. "The trust fund records, from the archives." I put the phone down slowly. "Thank you, Sarah. Close the door on your way out." "Mr. Wright, do you need anything else?" "No," I said, my eyes fixed on the blue folder. "I have everything I need." She left. The latch clicked shut. I stared at the folder. Inside that cardboard shell was the truth. Numbers don't lie, concrete doesn't lie. I reached out and opened it. I opened the folder. The paper inside was dry, smelling faintly of dust and archival storage. These were the physical statements, the quarterly reports mailed to the office before everything went digital. I ran my finger down the columns of the earliest records, 2010, 2011, 2012. I remembered these deposits, August 15, 2012, $15,000. That was the bonus from the River North Plaza project. I had skipped a vacation that year to make sure the curtain wall specifications were perfect. December 2013, $25,000. The retention fee from the stadium renovation. I remembered missing Jessica's Christmas pageant for a site visit because the concrete was curing too slowly in the cold. I had traded moments of my life for these numbers. I'd traded school plays and Saturday mornings for the security these columns represented. I had deposited $15,000 a month into that account for 5 years, compounding with interest. By my mental math, it should have been sitting at just under $1 million. It was a fortress, a financial bunker designed to protect Jessica from the world. It was for tuition, for a down payment on a first house. For a wedding, Linda was the trustee. The realization sat heavy in my gut. When we divorced, my lawyer, a shark named Gold, had warned me, "Don't give her control of the trust, Tom. Use an independent fiduciary." But I had waved him off. "She's her mother," I had said. "Linda might hate me, but she loves Jessica. She would never touch that money." I was an architect. I believed in the structural integrity of a mother's love. I assumed it was the one material on earth that couldn't be corrupted. I turned to my computer. The screen glowed with a harsh blue light, cutting through the gloom of the rainy afternoon. I navigated to the bank's portal. I hadn't used the login in years, but I kept my passwords in a physical ledger in my safe. I retrieved it, my hands steady, though my heart was beginning to beat with a strange, erratic rhythm. Username, T. Wright Trusts, row 1, password, Rillard. I typed it in. The keys clicked loudly in the silence. Enter. The screen went white. A spinning circle, buffering. I waited. The seconds stretched out. I looked out the window. The rain was still hammering the glass, washing the city in gray. The page loaded account. The Jessica Marie Wright Education Trust. Primary trustee, Linda Vance. Current balance. I blinked. I leaned closer to the screen, assuming the glare was hiding the numbers. Zero bullet. I stared at it. It wasn't low. It wasn't depleted. It was a vacuum. I hit refresh. The circle spun again. Zeroed, 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 zeroed. I felt a physical blow to my chest, as if I had walked into a steel beam. The air left my lungs. A cold sweat pricked the back of my neck. My extremities went numb. This wasn't just theft. This was a slaughter. I clicked on the tab marked Transaction History. The screen populated with a list of withdrawals. It was a hemorrhage. Aug 12, 2019. Withdrawal $50,000. Transferred Advance Global LLC. Jan 04, 2020. Withdrawal $75,000. Transferred Advance Global LLC. Sep 10, 2021. Withdrawal $12,020,000. Transferred Advance Global LLC. Page after page, I scrolled down, my eyes tracking the dates. August 2019. That was the month Jessica started her sophomore year. Robert had told her he was paying her tuition. He had sat her down and shown her the ledger. He had paid her tuition with my money, stolen from her own account, and then claimed credit for the generosity. He hadn't just stolen the cash. He had stolen her gratitude. He had stolen her respect for me. He had bought her love with the currency of my own labor, and then told her I was too cheap to care. Vance Global LLC. I stared at the beneficiary. The name was generic, corporate camouflage. It sounded like a shell company set up in a strip mall in Delaware. I closed the laptop. The snap of the lid was loud. Final. My hands weren't shaking anymore. The shock had passed, replaced by a cold, crystalline focus. In my line of work, panic is useless. When a load-bearing wall fails, you don't scream. You assess the damage. You calculate the vectors of collapse. You shore up what remains. And then you find out who poured the bad concrete. I reached for my desk phone. I didn't use the speed dial. I dialed a number from memory when I hadn't called in a decade. The phone rang 4 times. I was about to hang up when a voice answered. It was smoky, sharp, and sounded like it had been awake for 3 days. "Elena? I don't answer unknown numbers," the voice said. "But this is the private line. Who is this?" "It's Thomas Wright." There was a pause. I could hear the click of a lighter in the background, then the exhale of smoke.
Thomas Wright,
She said, her tone shifting from hostile to intrigued. The architect. "I haven't heard from you since the stadium audit. That was, what, 2015? 2014, I corrected. Elena Russo was a forensic accountant. In the Chicago construction world, where unions and mobs and city officials often shared the same dinner tables, you needed someone who could trace money through the sewer system. She was cynical, expensive, and brilliant. She could find a single dollar missing in a billion-dollar budget. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" she asked. "Please tell me the mayor is trying to skim off the library project again. I need a laugh." "I have a structural failure, Elena," I said, "but this one isn't made of concrete." "Personal?" "Extremely. I don't usually do divorce work, Thomas. It's messy. Too much emotion, not enough logic. It's not a divorce, it's theft. Grand larceny, potentially." I looked at the dark screen of my laptop. "I need you to trace a company called Vance Global LLC. Vance," she repeated. The name seemed to hang in the air between us. "Robert Vance, the new husband. Give me a second." I heard the rapid-fire clatter of a mechanical keyboard. She was typing faster than anyone I had ever met. "Vance Global," she muttered. "Registered in Nevada. Agent of service is a P.O. box in Las Vegas. No website, no employees listed. No products. It's a shell," I said. "It's a ghost," she corrected. "But ghosts leave ectoplasm. Let me look at the linkage." I waited. The rain hammered the glass. "Thomas?" Her voice had changed. The amusement was gone. "I'm here. I've heard this name recently." "Not in the construction logs, in the other logs." "What other logs?" "The kind I don't keep on my main server," she said. "The kind that involve people who don't sue you when you don't pay. They just break things." My blood ran cold. "What kind of circles are we talking about, Elena?" "Robert Vance isn't an investor," she said slowly. "I'm seeing flags here from a database shared by casino regulators. He's a whale, Thomas, but a bad one, the kind that chases losses. Gambling," I whispered. "High stakes. Baccarat, sports books. And when the casinos cut him off..." She trailed off. The keyboard clattered again. "He moved to private lenders. Loan sharks. That's a polite term for them. These are people who calculate interest in broken fingers." I closed my eyes. $2 million. He had burned through $1 million of Jessica's trust. "Dig, Elena," I said, my voice hardening into steel. "And I need everything. Bank accounts, wire transfers, debts. I need to know exactly where every cent of my daughter's money went. If he's involved with these people, Thomas, you need to be careful. Poking around their books can get you hurt." "He stole my daughter's future," I said. "He stole my name. He stole my house." "Your house?" "I'm getting to that. Just get me the data. I need it by tomorrow morning. That's a tight turnaround. Double your rate." "Done," she said. "But Thomas?" "Yes? If I find what I think I'm going to find, don't go to the police yet. You call me first." "Why?" "Because if this goes as deep as I think it does, the police might be too slow." I hung up the phone. I walked to the window again. The storm was breaking. The clouds were fracturing, allowing slivers of cold, pale light to stab through the gray. They wanted me in the third row. They wanted me silent. They wanted the mistake to sit quietly in the back while they celebrated their victory. I looked at my reflection in the glass. I was older than I was 10 years ago. My hair was graying at the temples. There were lines around my eyes, but the eyes themselves hadn't changed. They were the eyes of a man who solved problems for a living. I straightened my tie. Robert Vance thought he had dismantled me. He thought he had cut the power, shut down the utilities, and condemned the building. He was wrong. I wasn't going to disappear. I wasn't going to fade into the background. I was going to do what I did best. I was going to inspect the foundation, find the route, and bring the whole house down. I grabbed my coat. The next morning the sky was a bruised purple, the aftermath of the storm. I walked into the bank at 9 hours a.m. sharp. I didn't go to the teller line. I didn't take a number. I walked straight to the glass-walled office at the back. Arthur Penhaligon, the branch manager. I had known Arthur for 15 years. He was a small, nervous man who always looked like he was wearing a suit that belonged to his larger, more successful brother. He was the kind of banker who sweated when the interest rates changed. He was on the phone, laughing at something, leaning back in his chair. He looked up when I opened the door without knocking. His smile died instantly. The blood drained from his face so fast he looked like he might faint. "Mr. Wright," he stammered, fumbling to hang up the phone. He missed the cradle twice. I didn't know you were coming in." I closed the door behind me. I turned the lock. The click echoed in the small office. "Arthur," I said. He stood up, wiping his palms on his trousers. Can I get you some coffee? We have the good roast today." "I don't want coffee, Arthur. I want to know about the withdrawals." "Withdrawals?" His voice squeaked, jumping an octave. He looked at the blinds, wishing they were closed. "The Jessica Wright Trust. It's empty, Arthur." I stepped closer to the desk. "And you're going to tell me exactly how that happened?" Arthur swallowed hard. The sound was audible in the small glass-walled aquarium of his office. His Adam's apple bobbed like a cork in rough water. "Well, Mr. Wright," he began, his voice thin and reedy. "As you know, Mrs. Vance is the primary trustee. Under the terms of the original agreement, which I have right here, she has full authorization to manage the assets." He was reaching for a binder, trying to build a wall of paper between us. I placed my hands on his desk. I didn't slam them. I just set them down, palms flat, leaning my weight forward until I loomed over him. The cheap laminate of the desk creaked under the pressure. "Arthur," I said softly, "don't quote policy to me. I know the policy. I wrote the bylaws." He froze, his hand hovering over the binder. "She transferred the money to a shell company," I continued, my eyes locking onto his. "A company owned by her husband. That isn't management. That is embezzlement. That is fraud, and you authorize the transfers. I just process the transactions, Thomas. I don't ask questions about every wire. You handle thousands of legitimate transactions," I cut in. "But when a trust fund that has been dormant for 10 years suddenly starts bleeding $50,000 a month to a nebulous LLC with a P.O. box in Nevada, a competent banker asks a question. Unless—" I leaned closer. I could smell his fear. It smelled like stale coffee and nervous sweat. "Unless he has a reason not to." Arthur pulled a handkerchief from his pocket and dabbed his forehead. He was sweating through his collar. "You know what else is fraud, Arthur?" I asked, keeping my voice conversational, almost friendly. "Knowingly facilitating money laundering. That's a federal crime. That's 15 years in a federal facility where they don't serve the good roast." He flinched. "I'm going to the FBI, Arthur. I have a forensic accountant scrubbing the digital trail right now. She's very good. She'll find your signature on the authorization codes." Arthur collapsed into his chair. It wasn't a figure of speech. His legs gave out, and he slumped into the leather, looking suddenly very small and very old. He took off his wire-rimmed glasses and rubbed his eyes. "It's bad, Thomas," he whispered. "It's really bad." "Tell me," I commanded. He looked up, his eyes rimmed with red. "With Alma, it's not just the trust." My stomach tightened. "What else?" "It's the house," he said. The words hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "My house?" I asked slowly. "The house on Highland Park?" Arthur nodded miserably. "They came to me 3 years ago, Robert and Linda. They had a document, a quitclaim deed, a quitclaim granting full title to Vance Global LLC," Arthur said. "It had your signature on it, Thomas. Notarized." I stood up straight, feeling the blood roar in my ears. The room seemed to tilt. "I never signed a deed," I said. My voice was low, dangerous. "I haven't signed a document for that property since the divorce settlement gave Linda occupancy rights until Jessica turned 25. Arthur looked at his hands. "It looked real, Thomas. I swear." "The notary stamp?" It all checked out. They transferred the title to Vance Global. And then he stopped. He couldn't finish the sentence. "And then?" I pushed. "Finish it, Arthur." "And then they took out a second mortgage," he whispered. "A massive one, against the equity." "How much?" Arthur hesitated. "How much?" I barked. $2 million. I felt the air leave the room. $2 million. And the house was my masterpiece. I had built it with the proceeds from my first skyscraper. It was unencumbered. Paid for. It was meant to be the asset that secured Jessica's future, the safety net that would never break. They had stolen the trust. They had stolen the title. And they had leveraged the house to the hilt, draining every drop of equity out of the brick and mortar. Where's the money, Arthur? Gone, he said, his voice hollow. Transferred overseas. Macau, Las Vegas. The Caymans. Gambling, I realized. The pieces Elena had given me clicked into place. The late nights, the sudden need for cash. The frantic withdrawals. Arthur nodded. Robert Vance isn't an investor, Thomas. He's a dick, a whale, and a bad one. He chases the losses. He doubles down every time he loses. I looked at the terrified man in front of him. I felt a surge of disgust so potent I could taste bile. Is the mortgage current? I asked. Arthur shook his head. He looked like he wanted to cry. It's in default, Thomas. 90 days past due. He opened a drawer and pulled out a sheet of paper. He slid it across the desk. It was red-lettered. Notice of foreclosure. The notice went out yesterday, Arthur said. They're going to lose the house, Thomas. In 30 days, the bank takes possession. The sheriff will be there to evict them. I stared at the paper. In 30 days, they were throwing a wedding that cost 6 figures. Jessica's dream wedding, complete with imported flowers and a string quartet, while the roof over their heads was being repossessed. They were standing on a trapdoor that had already opened, suspended only by the momentary friction of their own lies. Does Jessica know? I asked. I don't think so, Arthur said. Robert intercepts the mail. He has everything sent to the P.O. box. Print it, I said. Thomas, I can't. Privacy laws. Privacy laws protect clients, Arthur, not criminals. I stared him down. You are an accessory to grand larceny. Right now, your only hope of staying out of prison is to become a cooperating witness. Print everything. He saw the look in my eyes. It wasn't the look of a client. It was the look of a prosecutor. He turned to his computer. The printer in the corner whirred to life. I walked out of the bank. 10 minutes later, clutching a thick manila folder. The sun had broken through the clouds completely now, but the light felt harsh, exposing the grime of the city streets. I felt a storm brewing that was bigger than any weather system. I got into my car, a vintage Jaguar I rarely drove. I gripped the steering wheel, the leather cool under my palms. I needed help. I couldn't build this scaffold alone. I needed my brother. Michael met me at the Rusty Anchor, a diner on the edge of the industrial district. It was the kind of place that served coffee strong enough to strip paint, and where the booths were patched with duct tape. Michael fit in here. He looked like me, same jawline, same height, but heart worn down by the friction of the world. He was a federal prosecutor. He spent his days chasing corruption, racketeering, and the kind of white-collar rot that destroys cities from the inside out. He was stirring his black coffee when I sat down. He didn't look up immediately. You look like hell, Tom, he said. I feel like a demolition site, I replied. I didn't order, I just slid the folder across the sticky laminate table. Michael put on his reading glasses. He scanned the first page, the trust fund withdrawals. His jaw tightened. He flipped a page, the quitclaim deed, the foreclosure notice. He read with the speed of a man who digested legal briefs for breakfast. Vance Global, he muttered. You know them? We've been tracking a ring, Michael said, looking up. His eyes were cold. Professional. Online gambling funds. Laundering money for offshore books. They set up shell LLCs to move cash without triggering SIRs. Robert Vance is the owner. He's not just the owner, Mike. He's the user. He's the mark. Michael flipped the casino logs. Elena had sent me, which I had added to the file. He forged her signature, according to the bank manager, and the notary stamp is from a guy who's been dead for 2 years. Michael closed the folder. The sound was sharp, like a gavel. That's bank fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, aggravated identity theft because of the amounts, grand larceny, money laundering. He took off his glasses. We can pick him up today, Tom. Right now, I can make a call, get a warrant signed within the hour. We can have a tactical team at his front door before lunch. I looked at my brother. I saw the hunger in his eyes. He wanted the takedown. He wanted justice. No, I said. Michael frowned. No? Tom, he stole millions. He stole your house. He's about to put your daughter on the street. If you arrest him now, I said slowly, Jessica will hate me. She's the victim. Michael slammed his hand on the table. A few truckers at the counter turned to look. He lowered his voice. Tom, she is the victim. She doesn't know that, I said. She thinks he's the hero. She thinks he paid for college. She thinks he's the benevolent stepfather who stepped up when her deadbeat dad failed. I took a sip of water. My throat felt like it was full of dust. If I arrest him 30 days before the wedding, I'm just the jealous ex-husband ruining her big day. I'm the villain in the narrative Linda has been writing for 10 years. Jessica will cling to him. She'll believe he's being persecuted. She'll mortgage her future to bail him out. So what's the plan? Michael asked, leaning back. You just let him walk her down the aisle. I need her to see it, I said. I need the foundation to crack while she's watching. I need the walls to come down when she's standing in the room. That's risky, Tom. Psychological damage is better than living a lie, I interrupted. I'm an architect, Mike. I calculate risk for a living. If you paint over rot, the building falls down anyway and it kills everyone inside. You have to expose it. You have to tear it out. My phone buzzed on the table. It was Alana again. I found something else. Check your email. Sub-account 04. I opened the email on my phone. A transfer from last week, I said, reading the data. $30,000. From where? Michael asked. From a sub-account labeled medical emergency. I felt sick. That was the fund I set up for Jessica in case she got sick. The rainy day fund. The God forbid fund. Where did it go? Michael asked. A jeweler, I said, reading the merchant code. Downtown, Van Cleef, and Arpals. I remembered the invite. Robert has been so supportive. He was buying their love with stolen money. He was buying a watch or a necklace to dazzle them, using the money meant to save Jessica's life. I have enough to bury him, Michael said. Let's move. Not yet, I said. Tom, the wedding, I said. Saturday. You're going to do it at the wedding? Michael looked shocked. In the church? They called me a mistake, I said softly. I looked out the window at the parking lot.
I'm just going to correct the error. I stood up. Bring the papers, Mike. Bring everything. And bring Miller. Detective Miller. The toughest financial crimes cop in the district.
You're serious? Michael said. I've never been more serious in my life. I'm going to bring the whole house down. That afternoon I went to my tailor. Giovanni has a small shop on Oak Street, tucked between a high-end boutique and a gallery that sells paintings of squares for $50,000. The shop smells of steam, chalk, and expensive wool. It is a place of silence and precision, two things I value above all else. I needed a suit, not just for the wedding, but for what was coming. I needed armor. I stood on the podium, looking at my reflection in the trifold mirror. Giovanni was pinning the hem of my trousers. You have lost weight, Signorite, Giovanni murmured, his mouth full of pins. Stress fractures, Giovanni, I said, watching my own eyes in the glass. They looked hard, flat. The bell above the door chimed. A gust of cold wind followed, disrupting the warm, humid air of the shop. I didn't turn around. I watched the door in the mirror. It was Robert. He didn't see me at first. He walked in with a swagger that consumed the room, talking loudly on his cell phone. I don't care about the Vicky. Tell him I'm good for it. The liquidity event is Monday. Yes, Monday. He snapped the phone shut. An affectation, since it was a smartphone, and looked around. He looked tanned, rested, or perhaps rested wasn't the word. He looked manic. His skin had the shiny, tight look of someone who has had a little work done, or who is running on pure adrenaline and terror. He saw me. He stopped. For a microsecond, the mask slipped. I saw the flash of panic in his eyes, the feral look of a prey animal spotting a predator. But then the smile plastered itself back onto his face. It was a wide, toothy grin that didn't reach his eyes. Thomas, he boomed. He didn't offer his hand. He walked over, unbuttoning his camel hair coat. "Robert," I said. I didn't move. I stayed on the podium, looking down at him. "Getting fitted for the back row?" he laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound. "Make sure it's comfortable. The pews at St. Jude's are unforgiving."
"Just making sure I look presentable," I said.
"Weddings are historical records. One wants to look sharp in the archives." He smirked. "You always were obsessed with the past, Thomas. That's your problem. You live in yesterday. I live in tomorrow." "Tomorrow is expensive, Robert," I said. "Can you afford it?" His smile faltered just at the edges. A small tick developed under his left eye. "I'm doing just fine," he said, puffing out his chest. "Better than fine. Linda treats me like a king. She says it's refreshing to be with a man who knows how to enjoy life, instead of just measuring it." He raised his arm to check the time, making a show of adjusting his cuff. The light from the chandelier caught the gold. It was a Rolex Daytona. The John Mayer dial, green face, solid gold. It was heavy, flashy, and undeniable. "Nice watch," I said. My voice was flat, devoid of admiration. He beamed. He rotated his wrist, letting the gold catch the light again. "A gift from Linda," he lied. The lie came easy to him, like breathing. "For the wedding, she has excellent taste, unlike some people." I looked at the watch. I calculated the weight of the gold. "The rarity of the movement. That watch costs $30,000 on the secondary market," I said. Robert rose. His arm lowered slowly. "You know your watches," he muttered, his eyes narrowing. "I know my numbers," I said. I stepped down from the podium. I was taller than him by 3 inches. I used every one of them. "It's funny," I continued, my voice dropping to a conversational murmur that only he could hear. $30,000. That is the exact amount withdrawn from Jessica's emergency medical fund last Tuesday." The color drained from Robert's face. It wasn't a gradual fade, it was instantaneous. He looked like a corpse that had been rouged. "You're imagining things, old man," he hissed. His breath smelled of mints and stale scotch. "You're checking up on us? That's stalking. It's auditing," I corrected. "You're bitter," he spat, stepping closer. "You're jealous because I'm the one walking her down the aisle. I'm the one she calls Dad when she's happy.
You're just the bank account she used to have."
Is that right? Just make sure your check for the wedding gift clears," he sneered, trying to regain his footing. "We're counting on it for the honeymoon. Buru Buru isn't cheap." He brushed past me, heading toward the tie rack. His hands were shaking. I saw it, a fine tremor in his fingers as he reached for a silk paisley tie. He had no idea he was standing on a trapdoor, puffing out his chest, while I had my hand on the lever. "Enjoy the watch, Robert," I said to his back. "It keeps excellent time. You'll want to know exactly how many minutes you have left." I paid Giovanni in cash. I walked out of the shop, the bell chiming behind me. The street was cold. The wind cut through my coat. I walked toward my car, parked down the block. As I reached for my keys, movement across the street caught my eye. A black SUV, tinted windows, engine idling, sending a plume of white exhaust into the gray air. The window rolled down 3 inches. A man was watching the tailor shop. He wasn't looking at the clothes. He was watching Robert through the plate glass window. He was big, heavy-set, with a shaved head and a neck that disappeared into his shoulders. A scar ran from his earlobe down to his collarbone, a jagged line of white tissue against olive skin. Elena had sent me his photo in the file. Elias, the Greek, Karis. He was an enforcer for the outfit Robert had borrowed from. He wasn't a debt collector who sent letters. He was the kind who used pliers. Elias sees me looking. He didn't turn away. He stared right at me. His eyes were dead, devoid of humanity. They were the eyes of a shark, sensing blood in the water. He nodded. Once. A tiny, almost imperceptible acknowledgement. "I see you, seeing me," and the window rolled up. I got into my car and locked the doors. My heart was hammering. Robert wasn't just in debt. He was in danger. Real physical danger. And if he was in danger and he was living in my house, sleeping down the hall from my daughter, Jessica was in the blast radius. The next day, Friday brought a digital slap in the face. I was in my hotel room. I couldn't bear to go back to my empty condo when my phone pinged. From Chloe, the wedding planner, to Thomas Wright. Subject, urgent, reception schedule updates. Dear Mr. Wright, permit advances, explicit instructions. This morning please be advised of the following changes to tomorrow's itinerary. You have been removed from the list of toast givers. The father of the bride's speech will be given by Mr. Vance. 2. Family formal photos are scheduled for 4. You are not required for this session. There will be a brief window at 4:45 p.m. for guest photos if you wish to participate. 3. Your seating at the reception has been moved to table 14. Thank you for your understanding. Chloe. I stared at the screen. The blue light stung my tired eyes. Not required. Table 14. I checked the seating chart attached to the email. Table 14 was by the kitchen doors. It was the table for the photographer's assistant and the DJ's girlfriend. I typed a reply. My fingers hit the glass screen with force. Noted, I wasn't going to speak at the reception. I wasn't going to raise a glass of champagne and toast the man who had robbed my child. I had a much bigger venue in mind. Friday night, the rehearsal dinner, was held at the Gilded Cage, a high-end bistro in the Loop that specialized in French fusion and pretension. The name fit perfectly. It was a beautiful cage, gilded with lies. I arrived alone. I wore a dark charcoal suit, a white shirt, no tie. I felt like a shadow. I felt like a ghost haunting his own life. The room was buzzing. Laughter, the clinking of crystal, the smell of truffle oil, and expensive perfume. Linda was at the head table. She was holding court, laughing loudly, throwing her head back. She looked beautiful. I had to admit, she had aged well, preserved by money and a lack of conscience. She wore diamonds around her neck, a cascading Riviera necklace. I recognized them. I had bought them for our 10th anniversary. We were in Florence. She had cried when I put them on her during the divorce. She claimed she had lost them. I think the maid took them, Tom. I'm so sorry. The insurance company had paid out. Liar. She was wearing the insurance fraud around her neck. I found my seat. Table 14 wasn't just near the kitchen. It was practically inside it. Every time the door swung open, I got a blast of steam, and the sound of chefs shouting. I sat down. I ordered a water. I watched them. The Vances. The happy couple. Jessica sat between Robert and Linda. She looked radiant, but there was a tightness around her eyes. She kept checking her phone. A young man sat down next to me. David, Jessica's fiancé. He was a good kid, an engineer, structural, like me. We had bonded over load calculations when Jessica first brought him home. He was solid. He understood how the world worked. He looked nervous. He kept rubbing the back of his neck, a tell I had noticed before. Mr. Wright, he said, pulling out the chair. Hello, David. I wanted to say I'm sorry, David stammered. He lowered his voice, leaning in. About the aisle thing, and the seating. I tried to talk to Jessica, but Linda, she's a force of nature. It's okay, David, I said. Don't fight battles you can't win. Not yet. I looked him in the eye. You focus on being a good husband. Do you love her? More than anything, he said. The sincerity in his voice was the first real thing I had heard all week. Good, I said. Then promise me one thing. Anything. No secrets, I said. A marriage built on secrets is just a ruin waiting to happen. The load-bearing walls will fail, David. Gravity always wins. David looked down at the tablecloth. He looked guilty. He started shredding a cocktail napkin. David, I asked, my instincts flaring. Is there a secret? He looked around to make sure no one was listening. The noise of the party provided a cover. It's Robert, he whispered. My hand tightened on my water glass. What about him? Hugh asked me for a loan. Last week, the cracks were spreading. A loan? He called me at work. He said it was for a surprise investment for Jessica's wedding gift. A surprise honeymoon upgrade? He wanted $50,000 cash. He told me not to tell Jessica or Linda because it would ruin the surprise. Did you give it to him? I asked. No, David said. I don't have that kind of money lying around, Mr. Wright. I'm just starting out. We're saving for a condo. Did he get angry? He got scary, David said. He shivered slightly. He switched. Instantly. He told me if I didn't help the family, maybe I wasn't generous enough for Jessica. He implied he could talk her out of the wedding. I felt a surge of protectiveness so strong it made my vision blur. Robert was blackmailing the groom. He was cannibalizing the entire family to feed the shark. I put a hand on David's shoulder. You did the right thing, David. Don't give him a dime. Ever. Do you hear me? David nodded. I promise. By the way, I asked casually, keeping my voice light, who signed the vendor contracts for tomorrow? The caterer? The venue? The florist? Robert insisted on handling it, David said. He said he has connections in the industry. He wanted to take the burden off us. Connections. Linda approached the table. She swayed slightly as she walked. She had had a few glasses of Chardonnay. She looked down at me with a mixture of pity and triumph. You look lonely, Thomas, she said. I'm just observing, Linda, I said, enjoying the show. She leaned in close. Her perfume, that lavender scent, was overpowering. It smelled like a funeral parlor. Don't cause trouble tomorrow, she hissed. The smile never left her face, for the benefit of the room, but her eyes were shards of ice. Trouble? I know you, she said. You're brooding. You think you've been wronged. If you do anything to embarrass us, if you make a scene, I will make sure you never see your grandchildren. I have full control over Jessica's narrative. I will paint you as the lunatic X. Remember that. I remember. Everything. Linda, I said. I remember the diamonds you're wearing, the ones you told the insurance company were stolen. She touched her throat, her eyes widening for a fraction of a second. Then she recovered. You're drunk? She said dismissively. Stay in your corner, Thomas. She walked away, touching her necklace as if to reassure herself it was still there. She thought she was untouchable. She thought the facade was the reality. She didn't know I had Michael and a team of forensic accountants working through the night, dismantling her life brick by brick, and I went back to my hotel room. It was 1 a.m. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Michael. Michael, we got the deed, and the casino logs, and the vendor contracts. I texted back. Contracts. Michael, he didn't pay them, Tom. The checks bounced yesterday. The caterer is threatening to walk out tomorrow morning. The florist hasn't loaded the trucks. My God. He hadn't paid for the wedding either. He had spent the money on the watch, on the gambling debts, on keeping the wolves at bay for 1 more week. He was going to let Jessica show up to St. Jude's, her dream venue, to find locked doors and empty tables. He was going to let her be humiliated in front of 200 guests, just to save his own skin for a few more hours. I dialed Michael immediately. Pay them, I said. What? Michael sounded exhausted. Pay the vendors, the caterer, the florist, the string quartet, everyone. Call them now. Offer them cash, 20% for the inconvenience. Use my personal account. Tom, why? Let him crash and burn. Let Jessica see the empty hall. That's the proof. No, I said firmly, because it's Jessica's day. The wedding happens. I won't let her be humiliated that way. I want the crash to happen on my terms. Not because the salad didn't show up. She deserves her flowers. There was a silence on the line. You're a better man than me, Tom, Michael sighed. Consider it done. I'll make the calls. And Mike? Yeah? Bring the papers. Bring everything. And bring Miller. We'll be there. Vestry. 11 a.m. The warrant is signed. I hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling pattern. I thought about Jessica. I remembered the day I taught her to ride a bike. She was 6. Don't let go, Dad, she had screamed, wobbling on the pavement. I've got you. I had promised. I won't let you fall. Tomorrow, I was going to have to break that promise. Tomorrow, I was going to have to let her fall. I was going to have to kick the supports out from under her world, but it was the only way to catch her before she hit the bottom. Saturday morning arrived with the crisp, unforgiving clarity of autumn in Chicago. The storm had passed. scrubbing the sky a brilliant, piercing blue. The wind coming off the lake was sharp enough to cut glass. The venue was St. Jude's Cathedral. I parked my car a block away. I walked toward the stretcher, my breath pluming in the cold air. St. Jude's is a masterpiece of neo-Gothic architecture. I had consulted on the restoration of the limestone facade in the late 90s. I knew the compressive strength of the flying buttresses. I knew the history of the slate tiles on the roof. It was a building designed to last 1,000 years. It was a place of truth, built on bedrock. I walked up the stone steps. They were worn smooth by generations of the faithful. Be like the stone, Thomas, I told myself, cold, unyielding, necessary. Inside, the nave was cavernous and dim, smelling of beeswax, frankincense, and expensive floral laurels. Lilies and white roses that I now knew I had paid for. I touched a stone pillar as I entered. It was cool and solid under my hand. The guests were beginning to arrive. The air was thick with the murmur of low conversations and the rustle of silk and wool. I recognized faces from my past life. Business partners, neighbors I had barbecued with, old friends of Linda's who had chosen her side in the divorce because it was the socially convenient thing to do. As I walked down the side aisle, the whispers started. They trailed behind me, like a wake in still water. That's Thomas, the ex. I heard he wasn't invited. He looks intense. Sad, really. He can't let go. I ignored them. I kept my eyes forward, fixed on the altar. I found the third row. It was exactly as the Nichin had threatened. The pew was hard oak, polished to a shine. I sat down on the far end. To my left, a distant cousin of Linda's, a woman named Marge, who I hadn't spoken to in 15 years, gave me a tight, pitying smile and shifted her purse away from me. I checked my watch. 10:45 a.m. I looked toward the side door near the transept. The door to the vestry. It was cracked open an inch. I saw a shadow move in the darkness beyond. A flash of a suit jacket. Michael! He was there. He had brought the cavalry. The organ began to play. The deep, resonant notes vibrated in my chest. It was Bach, Jesu, joy of man's desiring. The heavy oak doors at the back of the church swung open. The procession began. First the bridesmaids in pale blue chiffon, shivering slightly in the drafty church. Then the flower girl, dropping petals with solemn concentration. Then the moment everyone was waiting for, the doors opened wide. A collective intake of breath swept through the congregation. Jessica stood there. She was a vision, white lace, a long train, a veil that shimmered in the light filtering through the stained glass. She looked like a princess from a fairy tale. My heart ached with a fierce physical pain. My little girl, the girl who used to sleep on my chest while I reviewed blueprints, and standing next to her, offering his arm with the pomp of a visiting dignitary. Robert, he was wearing a tuxedo that I knew cost $3,000. Midnight blue, satin lapels. His chest was puffed out. He looked triumphant. He looked like a man who had pulled off the heist of the century and was now taking a victory lap. He nodded to the guests as they walked. He offered small, benevolent waves. He was playing the role of the patriarch to perfection. Look at me, his posture said. I am the provider. I am the father. They started the long walk down the aisle. Step, step, step. Jessica was smiling, but up close, I could see the tension. Her eyes were darting around the room, anxious, brittle. She looked like she was walking a tightrope, terrified of a gust of wind. She looked at Robert. He leaned in and whispered something to her. A joke? A reassurance? Probably a lie. They passed my row. Jessica didn't look at me. She kept her eyes fixed straight ahead, on David, who waited at the altar looking pale and nauseous. But Robert looked. He turned his head. He locked eyes with me in the third row. He winked. It was a slow, deliberate, arrogant wink. A gesture of total dominance. I won, his eyes said. You paid for the house. You paid for the school. You paid for the life. But I'm walking her. I owned this moment. My blood ran cold, but I didn't react. I didn't scowl. I didn't look away. I just watched him. You think you won, Robert? You have no idea. They reached the altar. Robert kissed her cheek, a performance for the videographer hovering nearby. He shook David's hand with a grip that looked too tight. He patted David on the shoulder, a condescending gesture of ownership. Then he sat down in the front row, next to Linda. Linda was dabbing her eyes with a lace handkerchief. She looked up at Robert adoringly. Father Callahan stepped forward. He was an old man, kind but frail, his voice amplified by the microphone. Dearly beloved, we are gathered here today in the sight of God, and in the face of this company, to join together this man and this woman in holy matrimony. I sat, my hands were clasped in my lap, resting on the inner pocket of my jacket. I could feel the sharp corner of the envelope against my ribs. My heart was hammering against my sternum like a trapped bird, but my breathing was slow, controlled. Wait for it. Not yet. The readings. 1 Corinthians, love is patient. Love is kind. The irony was suffocating. The hymns. Amazing grace. The time was ticking away. The air in the church felt heavy, charged with the static of unspoken secrets. Father Callahan looked out at the congregation. He adjusted his glasses. Here it comes. Into this holy estate these two persons present. Come now to be joined. If any man can show just cause, why they may not lawfully be joined together. The silence in the cathedral was absolute. It was a heavy, ritualistic silence. Let him speak now, or else hereafter forever hold his peace. This is the part where people hold their breath for a second, a collective pause, and then relax as the moment passes. It is a formality. No one speaks. But I didn't relax. I stood up. The wood of the pew groaned under the sudden shift in weight. It was a small sound, a creak of old timber, but in the acoustic perfection of the stone cathedral it sounded like a gunshot. Heads turned. It started as a ripple, a few confused glances, and then spread like a wave. A collective gasp, sharp and sudden, sucked the air out of the room. Linda whipped around in the front row. Her face went pale, then red. "Thomas," she hissed. It was a stage whisper, audible to the first 10 rows. "Sit down! My God, sit down!" Robert stood up. He turned to face me. His face was a mask of incredulous fury. "Security!" he shouted, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Get him out! He's drunk! He's trying to ruin it!" I stepped out of the pew and into the center aisle. I buttoned my jacket. I adjusted my cuffs. "I am not drunk," I said. My voice was calm, but I projected it from the diaphragm, the way I would speak to a foreman on a noisy job site. It bounced off the stone walls, clear and resonant. "And I am not silent. Dad, please." Jessica cried from the altar. She looked horrified. Her hands flew to her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes instantly. "Don't do this. You promised. You promised you wouldn't make a scene." "I promised to protect you," I said, looking directly at her. I started walking toward the altar, slow, steady click of my shoes. On the stone floor was a metronome, counting down the seconds of Robert's life. "And that is what I am doing. You're ruining my wedding," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I hate you for this." "I'm saving your life," I said. I reached the front of the nave. I stood 10 feet from where Robert and Linda were standing. I turned to face the congregation, then turned back to face them. I looked at Robert. He was red in the face, sweating profusely now. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the cornered, dangerous look of a rat. "You called me a mistake," I said to him, my voice level. "You wrote in a note to my daughter that I was a mistake from the past." "You are," Robert shouted. He stepped forward, fists clenched. "You're a sad, pathetic, bitter man. Get out before I throw you out." "I have a question, Robert," I said. I reached into my inner pocket. I pulled out the thick envelope. "Who paid for Jessica's college?" Robert froze. His eyes darted to the envelope, then to Jessica, then to the guests. "I did," he yelled, trying to bluster his way through. "Everyone knows that. I paid for it." "Then why?" I said, opening the folder and pulling out the first document. "Do the bank records show the money came from the Thomas Wright Education Trust?" I held up the paper. It was an enlarged copy of the bank ledger. Total deposits by Thomas Wright between 2010 and 2015. $300,000 plus interest. The church was deathly quiet. You could hear a pin drop. Current balance, 0, I read. He's lying, Linda shrieked. She stood up, her diamonds flashing under the altar lights. She looked deranged. He forged them. It's a trick. Withdrawals, I continued, my voice hard as granite, ignoring her. Starting August 2019, $50,000, $75,000. All transferred to Vance Global LLC, a shell company registered to Robert Vance in Nevada. I looked at Jessica. She was staring at the paper in my hand, trembling. You didn't pay for your college, Jess. I did. He stole the money from your trust fund, moved it to his company, and wrote the check in his own name to buy your loyalty. Jessica looked at Robert. Robert, she whispered. Is that true? Robert was backing away. It's complicated, Jess. He doesn't understand high finance. It was an investment strategy. We were leveraging the assets too. I understand theft. I cut him off. And I understand embezzlement. I pulled out the next document. This is the deed to our family home, the house you grew up in. The house you grew up in. The house you're getting ready in. I held it up high for the room to see. A quitclaim deed, transferring ownership to Vance Global, dated 3 years ago. I turned the document toward Robert, and this signature. Thomas Wright? I didn't sign this, Robert. I was in London that week. My passport proves it. It's a forgery, I said. A felony. And the second mortgage? I asked, turning the screw. The second mortgage? Linda whispered. Her hand went to her throat. $2 million, I said. Taken out against the equity of the house. The money is gone. Gone? Linda's voice was a squeak. Gambled away, I said. We have the records from the casino in Macau. We have the wire transfers to the offshore sports books. $2 million in losses, Robert. I looked at the man in the tuxedo. He was shaking so hard, his watch was rattling against his cufflink. Paid for with my alimony, my daughter's trust, and the roof over her head. Dad, Jessica's voice was barely a whisper. She looked like she was going to faint. David caught her by the elbow, steadying her. The house is in foreclosure, Linda, I said, looking at my ex-wife. The notice arrived at the bank yesterday. You have 30 days to vacate. You're homeless. No, Linda moaned. No, he told me. He said the investments were paying huge returns. He said we were rich. He lied, I said. Just like he lied about the watch you're wearing. Just like he lied about paying for this wedding. I pointed to the flowers. The checks to the vendors bounced yesterday. I paid for this wedding this morning. Me, the mistake. Jessica looked at the man she had asked to walk her down the aisle. The man she had defended, the man she had chosen over me. Is that true? She asked. Robert. Her voice was unrecognizable. Robert looked at the door. He looked at the window. There was no escape. He's trying to ruin us, Jess. He screamed, spit flying from his mouth. He's jealous. I love you. I raised you. I was there. You robbed her, I said. I looked to the side door. The vestry. Now, I said. The doors banged open. Michael walked out. He looked like the wrath of God in a cheap suit. He was flanked by Detective Miller and 2 uniformed FBI agents. 3 more police officers entered from the back of the church, blocking the main aisle. Robert Vance, Michael announced. His voice boomed through the silent cathedral. Linda Vance, you are under arrest for bank fraud, wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, forgery, and money laundering. The chaos was instant. Linda screamed. It was a raw, animal sound of pure denial. She lunged at me, her hands clawing at the air. You bastard! You planned this. You ruined my life. For months, I said calmly. I stepped back, out of reach. And you ruined your own. The police grabbed her. She fought them, kicking and screaming, her hat falling off. They moved on, Robert. He didn't fight. He tried to run. He scrambled toward the choir loft, knocking over a vase of white roses. The vase shattered on the stone floor. A crash of glass and water, Detective Miller tackled him before he made it 3 steps. It wasn't graceful. It was effective. They went down in a heap of tuxedo and limbs. They hauled him up. He was gasping for air, his nose bleeding. They cuffed his hands behind his back. The click of the metal handcuffs was the loudest sound in the world. It was the sound of the foundation finally snapping. Jessica, Linda wailed as they dragged her down the aisle, her heels scraping on the stone. Don't let them take me. I'm your mother. Tell them to stop. Jessica stood frozen. She didn't move. She didn't speak. She watched the police drag the parents she had chosen out the side door. The heavy oak door slammed shut, cutting off Linda's screams. The church was silent again. The guests were stunned, frozen in their pews, mouths open. The organist sat with his hands hovering over the keys, terrified. I stood alone in the center of the aisle, surrounded by shattered glass and scattered papers. Jessica looked at the empty space where Robert had stood. Then she looked at the papers on the floor. Then she looked at me. Her face crumbled. The mask of the happy bride dissolved, revealing the devastation underneath. She wasn't a bride anymore. She was just a terrified little girl whose world had just collapsed. You knew, she whispered. You knew the whole time. I found out when you sent the invitation. I said. She took a step toward me. Why didn't you tell me? She sobbed. Why did you do it here? Why did you humiliate me in front of everyone? Because you wouldn't have listened, I said. It hurt to say it. It felt like cutting out my own heart. But it was the truth. You were inoculated against the truth, Jess. If I had come to you privately, Linda would have spun a lie. Robert would have produced a fake document. You would have called me jealous and cut me off forever. I stepped closer. You needed to see the handcuffs, I said gently. You needed to see the foundation collapse while you were watching. So you would know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that it was rotten. She looked at David. He stepped forward. He took her hand. His grip was firm. He's right, Jess, David said softly. Jessica looked at him, betrayed again. You knew. Not everything, David said. But Robert, he tried to get me to invest in Vance Global last week. He threatened me. I didn't know what to do. Jessica looked back at me. Her eyes were filled with pain, shame, and a dawning realization of the magnitude of the lie she had been living. I called you a mistake, she said. Her voice shook. I know, I said. I didn't let you walk me. I know. She looked at the empty aisle. The aisle I should have walked her down. I don't know how to fix this, she whispered. It's all broken. Everything is broken. I looked at her. I saw the daughter I had built a treehouse for. I saw the girl who used to hand me my tools. I'm an architect, Jess, I said. I offered a small, sad smile. I fix broken structures. That's what I do. But you have to want it rebuilt. She burst into tears. She ran to me. She didn't walk. She ran. She buried her face in my chest, ruining her makeup on my tuxedo, sobbing with the force of 10 years of missed grief. I wrapped my arms around her and held her tighter than I had ever held anything in my life. I felt the tension in her frame, the shaking, the collapse. I'm sorry, Dad, she wept. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay, I whispered into her hair, smelling the lavender and the tears. I've got you. The rat is gone. We're standing on solid ground now. The wedding never reached the kiss. The reception was canceled. The guests filtered out, whispering, shell-shocked. They left the gifts uncertain of what to do. I sat on the stone steps of the empty church with Jessica and David. The sun was setting now, turning the gray stone into gold. The air was getting colder. Jessica had taken off her veil. She sat huddled in David's suit jacket, shivering. They're going to prison? She asked. Her voice was raspy. Yes, Michael said, joining us. He had stayed behind to handle the evidence. For a long time, the fraud is extensive. Jess? Millions. The FBI is involved now. I have nothing, she said, staring at her satin shoes. The house is gone. The money is gone. I have a mountain of debt they took out in my name. Robert used my credit cards. You have a father, I said. She looked at me. Her eyes were red, swollen. I bought the mortgage note from the bank this morning, I said. Her eyes widened. I own the house, Jess. That's not being foreclosed. I paid off the arrears. You can live there, or we can sell it. It's up to you, but no one is kicking you out. And the debt? We'll handle it, I said. Michael is good at clawing back assets. We'll sue the casinos. We'll find what's left, and I'll cover the rest. She leaned her head on my shoulder. It was a weight I had missed for a decade. I don't have a husband, she said, looking at David. We didn't say the vows. We're not married. David squeezed her hand. The license is in the car, he said. We don't need a show, Jess. We don't need the flowers or the string quartet. We just need us. She smiled. It was weak, fragile, but it was real. Dad? She asked. Yeah? Can we go get a burger? I haven't eaten in 2 days. Linda had me on a juice cleanse for the photos. I laughed. It was a rusty sound, but it felt good. It felt like the first breath of air after being buried alive. Yeah, I said. Let's go get a burger. I know a place. We stood up. Jessica took David's hand. Then she reached out and took mine. We walked out of the church, 3 people, moving forward. The music had stopped. The applause was gone. The grand facade had been demolished. But as we walked down the steps, I knew that for the first time in 10 years, we were walking in the right direction. The blueprint had been flawed. The structure had collapsed. But the foundation held. Thanks for walking this journey with us all the way. With Thomas and Jessica in mind, was this ending how it should have happened, or should he have warned her privately? Let us know in the comments.